yesterday we find out that Glenn Greenwald, who has been publishing excellent journalism through The Intercept and The Intercept Brazil, is being charged with a cybercrime. He is accused of helping hackers conceal their identity, and they're basically trying to do what they're doing to Julian Assange, which is separate his activities and behaviors from those of a journalist. As we've seen, Glenn Greenwald issued a statement, and he's going to continue publishing his work through The Intercept despite all of this. And when he said that, it reminded me a lot of Julian Assange, because we're seeing that WikiLeaks is continuing to publish and provide us with some really groundbreaking information, specifically with the OPCW leaks. So I will open it up to my co-host right now. If you guys want to weigh in some of your thoughts on this, and then also we'll be pulling up an article for you guys so you can kind of follow along with this story.
I think the thing that's
so
important for people to remember about Bolsonaro too is that he's an open fascist. He's someone that has literally advocated for people going out and killing political opposition. So Brazil is on a very slippery slope back to a dictatorship. And it's something that early on when Bolsonaro got elected, I heard a lot of people talking about fears of whether or not the Brazilian institutions could weather a storm such as Bolsonaro, so to speak, about trying to turn their democracy back into a fascist state. So I think that this is part and parcel of what Bolsonaro's grand plan is, and it's just through the imprisonment of Glenn Greenwald and the charges against him that this is playing out.
So I want to make this point too. Oftentimes, human rights abuses and abuses of power in the West are used to justify abuses of power in other countries. And I feel that perhaps what could be happening, and this is purely speculative, is that the Brazilian government feels very comfortable putting this charge or filing this charge against Glenn Greenwald, because the United States really can't retaliate against their government because of this, because of what we are doing to Julian Assange. It would be extremely hypocritical to do so. And I feel that the Brazilian government could have perhaps felt empowered by our actions, because
that's
essentially they're following our lead. And that is extremely problematic. And we could expect this to continue if Julian Assange is brought to the United States and tried and convicted.
No, you're absolutely right. Look, the Trump administration helped hire Bolsonaro happen. They have a very, very close relationship with Bolsonaro. His well, cabinet full of crooks, as The Intercept and Glenn Greenwald's reporting showed. Glenn Greenwald is being charged with cyber crimes when you actually, he got a 95-page indictment dropped on him with the cyber crimes charges. But they're like, he encouraged the hackers to cover their tracks and was communicating with them as they were actively monitoring officials' private Telegram chats. Telegram is an app that you communicate with, at any rate, he's being charged with doing journalism. Julian Assange also being charged with doing journalism. The rightward shift that the planet really has experienced, whether basically on their own, because austerity programs fail and people get pushed to one side or the other normally, and a right-wing strongman will always beat a milquetoast statist every single time. Because of this rightward shift, we're starting to see the war on journalism ramp up. If you live in an authoritarian state, like we do in the United States, like Brazilians do, you are going to see this. And the United States set the precedent that it's okay to arrest someone for doing journalism. You can go ahead and charge them with whatever, as long as it falls under the umbrella of cyber crimes. this is Josh, maybe if you could pull up the Common Dreams article. This is something that Glenn Greenwald was already done and over with. Last year, Bolsonaro flat out announced, hey, I'm going to target and investigate Glenn Greenwald and The Intercept, and suck it. And when they actually tried to do that, the Brazilian Supreme Court stepped in. They said, no, Glenn Greenwald has the right of every constitutionally protected journalist. You're in Brazil. The Intercept, they're fine. You are not allowed to investigate. So they scratched their heads for a few months. They watched absolutely nothing occur in the United States that made it look like there was genuine opposition to having Julian Assange be extradited here. And so they followed suit and created almost an identical, indictment for Glenn Greenwald. The parallels are everywhere.
Yeah, and his attorney has spoken out about this, and Julian Assange's attorney, excuse me, has spoken out about this. In particular, she went to Twitter talking about the similarities in the cases, and that basically they are trying to attack the communications that frequently and often occur between a journalist and his or her source, and by making that a criminal behavior is extremely dangerous and will set a really negative legal precedent for journalists in the future.